Well, we finally heard from the Blazers' new coach about his rape allegation. And then they stopped taking any questions about it.
Can you maybe elaborate on that?
We've addressed this. It's been asked and answered.
But just because they're done talking about it doesn't mean we are.
I thought that the news conference was pretty much a nightmare.
And tomorrow's the day we've been waiting for 15 months. Oregon and Washington are finally reopening. But before you rip that mask off, let's take a look at what to expect when you're heading out. And after getting kicked out of the legislature, former state representative Mike Neerman is running to replace himself. Yeah, you heard that right. So let's take a look at his competition. Here's the story.
All right, thanks for being with us. Hi, I'm Dan Haggerty. Lots to talk about, as you can tell from the top of the show there, getting into some heavy topics. So all the ways to discuss those are right here at the bottom of your screen. So use the hashtag HeyDan on Twitter. You can email us at thestory@kgw.com. Find me on Facebook and Instagram and anything you want. Reach out to us. Let's have a conversation. And let's start with the big story. This is all about the Portland Trail Blazers announcing the hiring of their new head coach. Now, this isn't really a sports show. You probably know that if you watch it, but this really isn't a sports story. It got much deeper than that. Now, I want to warn you, we are about to talk about sexual assault, and some of the details will be hard for people to hear. This weekend, the Blazers officially named Chauncey Billups as their head coach. Famous name, he played 17 years in the NBA. He's been an assistant coach for the Los Angeles Clippers for the last year. He was also accused of gang raping a woman in 1997 with 2 other men. Police reports say she went to the hospital, had a rape kit exam, and it revealed injuries to her genitals and throat. Billups was not charged with the crime, but the woman sued him and he settled with her out of court 3 years later. Billups denies the allegations, admitting they had a sexual encounter, but saying that it was consensual. Now, today, the Blazers held a press conference introducing Billups to Portland. General Manager Neil O'Shea started things off by talking about those allegations against Billups, which he says they took, quote, very seriously during the hiring process.
We not only conducted our traditional background check after offering him the position, we also commissioned an independent investigation into the incident in question in 1997. The findings of that incident corroborated Chauncey's recollection of the events, that nothing non-consensual happened.
Now, you might be wondering, okay, how exactly did they conduct this investigation? Who did they talk to? What did those people tell them? Here's O'Shea's response to that line of questioning.
You're just gonna have to take our word that we hired an experienced firm that ran an investigation that gave us the results we've already discussed.
All right, so not many details there on that, but we still did get to hear from Billups. He also opened his portion of the press conference by addressing the allegations against him.
I learned at a very young age as a player, and not only a player, but a young man, a young adult, that every decision has consequences. But this experience has shaped my life in so many different ways. My decision making, obviously, who I allow to be in my life, the friendships and the relationships that I have, and how I go about them. It's impacted every decision that I make.
Okay. There were a lot of reporters there, and one of those reporters asked Billups a follow-up question based on what you just heard him say. And here's what happened.
You said the 1997 incident shaped you in unbelievable ways. Can you maybe elaborate on that and how it helped shape you?
Jason, we appreciate your question. We've addressed this. It's been asked and answered, so happy to move on to the next question here.
So that moment right there, that moment has been getting a lot of attention and a lot of backlash from fans, from the local media, from the national media. It's in some ways become a big part of this story. Not how this is a new era for the Blazers, not how Billups is going to improve the team's defense. Right now, the story seems to be how the Blazers won't answer questions about the rape allegations against their new head coach, literally telling reporters to move on. I spoke with Brenda Tracy about this. She's an advocate for sexual assault survivors. She is one herself. In 1998, she accused Oregon State football players of gang raping her. Here's what she had to say about the Blazers cutting off that question.
That was extremely harmful. And I think that was a pivotal moment in the press conference. I think that question would have given us insight into how Billups has, processed the event, and would have given us some insight into who he is as a man and how he may lead as a coach. And we didn't get that opportunity. He didn't get to say anything. But I also think that this was probably all, decided before the press conference. I don't know that I felt like, everything was kind of rehearsed, laid out, what was going to be said, what was going to be addressed, what wasn't going to be addressed. And it was a very much like, we already answered, move on, get over it. We're done with that. We made a decision. We're not talking about that anymore.
Now, Billups does have his defenders, some people who believe he's innocent, other people who say they really don't know what happened that night, so they can't make a judgment call either way. And I asked Tracy about those people and how she thinks they should consider this case and these allegations.
I think that there's a lot to go on in this case. I think that there is a rape kit. I think there's a police report. There's a settled civil suit that we don't know about. There's conflicting, statements from him from back then. There's a lot of unanswered questions. So there's a lot to go on. And in general, I think the population needs to understand too, false reports are very rare. Maybe 2%. Most survivors are telling the truth that something did happen. And the other thing is that, while most sexual violence is committed by men, most men don't commit sexual violence. And I just don't think that there's about 30 head coaching positions in the NBA. Did we really need to hire somebody with this type of a history? There are other qualified candidates for this position.
Speaking of the other candidates, we should also talk about the other top choices for the Blazers head coaching job. One was this woman, Becky Hammon, who's been an assistant coach for the San Antonio Spurs since 2014. She would have been the first ever female head coach of an NBA team. The Blazers were also considering Jason Kidd, who's been with a few different teams, but fans weren't happy about him either because he pleaded guilty to domestic violence in 2001, and he was just named the head coach of the Dallas Mavericks. And with that, I want to bring in Orlando Sanchez and talk about kind of a different angle. This one has to do with Damian Lillard, because he took a little bit of heat throughout this entire process because he supported the hiring of Billups, and then people were upset that he was associating himself with somebody with these types of allegations, and then Dame said he didn't know about the allegations. It's been a big mess, and it's ended with this report from Yahoo saying that he's actually considering leaving town, leaving the team.
Dan, this has been a crazy and messy, to your point, 48 hours or so within Rip City. And that was a big deal that Damian Lillard, even had written on Twitter, like, look, this wasn't all on me. This wasn't my choice, even though he had come out reportedly and said, I like Chauncey Billups as a future head coach. With all of that said, that has brought up a firestorm of things, and Damian Lillard basically mentioning the unthinkable in this report in saying that, I could be pushed out of Portland. And even though he wasn't quoted in saying that, this coming from Chris Haynes is somebody that is a friend of his, somebody who has done stories with him in the past. So when a story like that comes out from Chris Haynes, you have to take it pretty seriously that it involves Damian Lillard and that it is coming from Damian Lillard.
A guy with his reputation and his connection to the team and to Dame, it raised some eyebrows. So as somebody in that kind of sports journalism world, what are you going to be paying attention to moving forward when it comes to the best player on the team? Yeah,
this was a warning shot, Dan, that basically says, look, I'm not that happy here right now. I'm frustrated with the way things have ended here in Portland. I don't like losing in the first round. I don't like, for the past 5 years, and I want to win a championship. So that's what I'm going to be paying attention to, is how Neil Olshey will make roster moves. Is he willing to make a big trade? What is he willing to do to put the pieces next to Damian Lillard to make this a championship team? That's where they're at right now. Lillard's frustration is really about winning games right now and getting further than the first round, because they've been knocked out of the first round of the playoffs 4 of the last 5 years.
And he certainly wants to distance himself from all this controversy surrounding Billups.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Orlando, thank you, sir. Now, speaking of controversy, why don't we talk about the elephant or elephants in the room? After members of the Oregon GOP decided that the best person to replace Mike Neerman, the first lawmaker to ever be expelled from Salem, would in fact just go ahead and be Mike Neerman, in a move that almost feels like a loophole but isn't. Neerman's seat got kicked out of office after every lawmaker except him voted for his expulsion. It stemmed from this video where he opened a locked door at the Capitol and let in angry right-wing protesters who then fought with Capitol Police, as well as another video that was from before this that surfaced that appeared to show Neerman planning the whole thing and calling it Operation Hall Pass. He's currently under a criminal investigation for everything, and it's typically the type of thing you would imagine someone would resign over, but not Neerman. He's riding it out. It got him expelled, and it left his seat wide open. So, on Friday night, the GOP nominated 5 people to be considered for that seat, for that job. And then the county commissioners near the district will appoint one of those 5 people. As we reported last night, Neerman was the top recommendation, but he wasn't the only recommendation. So let's take a look at the other 4, starting with John Swanson, a Republican staffer in the state Senate. This is a picture from the Oregon Catalyst, a conservative blog that claimed he was instrumental in planning 3 Republican walkouts. A source told me, a source who was at that vote on Friday, said that when he was asked if he would have expelled Mike Neerman, he said no. Jim Bunn, a former state senator from 1987 to 1995. He was in the political world a while ago in an elected capacity. He was then in 95 elected to Congress. And this is video of Bunn in D.C. where he did serve 1 term. Then Mickey Garris, who is a former Dallas City councilor who made the news when people tried to recall him in 2016 for posting on Facebook that Islam is pure evil and that he would use physical violence to keep a transgender woman from using a girl's locker room at his daughter's school. These statements created a lot of backlash and created a lot of support for him. He also owns a gun shop and has a political podcast called Patriot Uprising. And I want to take a second and give you a listen to the intro to that podcast.
As patriots, it's our duty to rise up in a world full of darkness. Evil comes in many forms, and it lurks around unexpected corners. It's time to stop wondering what will happen if it comes to war. War is already here.
That episode started with his concerns of Governor Brown's COVID restrictions, where he called her the Fuhrer. Lastly, Anna Scharf, who is from a farming family. This is a post from Facebook where you can see she supports timber unity and described herself as a political analyst on LinkedIn. I don't think she has a podcast. So all of those people, including Neerman, will meet with the commissioners of Polk, Yamhill, Marion, and Benton counties, and then those commissioners will vote to place someone in Neerman's seat, maybe Neerman. If you have some questions about this process or anything that you think we might need to add to this report, please let me know. Email us at thestory@kgw.com or use Twitter in the hashtag #HeyDan.
Even though we're reopening tomorrow, keep in mind, a small amount of people who are fully vaccinated will still test positive.
I was shocked when I discovered I, in fact, had COVID-19.
It's already happening in our nursing homes.
We had 9 residents test positive. 7 of them were vaccinated.
When the story continues.
Thanks for all the questions and comments. Keep them coming. Use the hashtag #HeyDan. I also want to make sure that everyone knows about our Hey Help campaign this week. We're asking you to consider donating to the Blanchet House, which helps people living on the streets of Portland. They did some incredible work in the last few days, and man, were they vital, handing out water and ice. It was a historic heat wave. And you know what? It's really not over. We're not at 116 degrees, but we're still going to be hanging out in the 90s for a while. But they've done great work to literally keep people alive, among other fantastic programs. They offer free meals in downtown Portland and even having some recovery programs with peer support for those wishing to pursue a sober life. To donate, just open up the camera on your phone, point it at the QR code on your screen, and it will give you a link where you can help out, or you can go to kgw.com/heyhelp. All right, let's talk about something I know a lot of you are looking forward to. Tomorrow, Oregon and Washington are officially fully reopening after 15 years. Wait, no, months. Either way, both states have had pandemic restrictions since March of 2020. It has felt like 15 years, and I talked to Pat Doors about what to expect in terms of masks and social distancing and everything else that we've gotten pretty used to over the last year and a half.
Pat Doris, let's talk for a second. Let's start with masks. Tomorrow, what changes with masks?
Well, these things that we all have in our cars or our pockets or whatever, we don't need them anymore to go into the stores. I talked with Fred Meyer and Safeway and New Seasons. They say customers who are vaccinated do not have to wear their mask. They're going to ask customers who are unvaccinated to keep wearing them, but they're not going to check. And employees who are unvaccinated as well will not have to wear masks. So that is going to be a huge deal. And that's mostly what you're going to notice tomorrow.
Now, let's say, for instance, there is a business owner who still feels as though people should be wearing masks inside of their establishment. Will they still be able to say, hey, you have to wear a mask to come in here?
Yep, that is their right, and they can do that. And then we'll see how the market reacts. I mean, maybe people will come in and say, thanks for protecting us all. Maybe people will say, you know what, I'm going to go someplace that does not require a mask. But yes, they do have that right.
I just wanted to ask that question before there's any kind of confrontations, because you know how this sort of stuff goes when these changes happen. Outside of masks, what other things will we notice about the world being different for us tomorrow?
Well, things are basically opening up again. There'll be no more capacity limits in restaurants, for example. You can eat inside, outside. They can pack them in, up to what the fire marshal says is safe. Venues, sporting events, if you're going to watch a soccer match or anything like that, it can be shoulder to shoulder now from now on. You go to a Blazer game in the fall, it'll be shoulder to shoulder. You can go to concerts. There'll be movies you can go to. You can go to weddings and funerals and everything else where we used to gather and then suddenly we couldn't. Now you can again. You may see churches coming back to life as well as people start coming back into the pews.
All right. Pat Doris, there you have it. Life back to normal for most people, vaccinated people feeling safe from the virus. Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Let's hope so. Yeah, my pleasure.
Now, why don't we count some vaccines as we talk about vaccinated people? According to the CDC, 2.46 million Oregonians have gotten at least their first dose, and that works out to be 69.4% of the state's adult population. In Washington, the state is reporting 4.22 million people with at least their first dose. That's 68.8% of that state's 16 and older population, which is the metric that Washington is using. Now, even though millions of people are fully vaccinated in both states, we still get a lot of questions about coronavirus, especially about breakthrough cases, people testing positive for COVID after they are fully vaccinated. And health officials say it happens. It is rare, but it happens. And if it does, you are much better off being vaccinated. Kristen Severance explains.
I was shocked when I discovered I, in fact, had COVID-19.
Kevin McKay runs Cornerstone Care Option, a senior care facility in southeast Portland. Like many long-term care facilities, his clinic had its first coronavirus outbreak in April of 2020. But after 75% of his staff and 92% of his residents were fully vaccinated, he thought they'd be protected from a second outbreak. He was wrong. Just over 1 year later, they had one.
We had 9 residents test positive. 7 of them were vaccinated.
Out of the 15 positive cases between residents and staff, 9 were among people who were fully vaccinated. These are called breakthrough cases. The CDC defines a breakthrough case as any person that tests positive for COVID-19 more than 14 days after completing one of the FDA-authorized vaccines. As of the middle of June, more than 2 million Oregonians have been fully vaccinated. The Oregon Health Authority has identified about 1,000 breakthrough cases. That means only 0.05% of Oregonians have tested positive for COVID after completing their vaccination. Less than 100 of those cases resulted in hospitalization. Data shows 30% of Oregon's breakthrough cases have occurred in people over the age of 65. Dr. Marcel Curlin, an infectious disease specialist at OHSU, says older people tend to produce fewer antibodies.
If you're young, you make a higher level of antibodies, and if you're older, you make a lower level of antibodies. It's not everyone is making antibodies, but just the ability to mount a really high response is better in younger people.
The Oregon Health Authority recently released a report showing 84% of residents and 62% of staff at long-term care facilities in Oregon are fully vaccinated. 10% of all breakthrough cases have occurred in people who live in long-term care facilities or other congregate care settings. But McKay says the risk of breakthrough cases in facilities like his were not made clear enough.
I wished I had been told that these cases were occurring, particularly in long-term care, because at that time we were going by guidelines, which had us testing every month for our staff. We were previously weekly. We had rapid availability. We were told to just go ahead and test monthly, and that was a mistake.
Dr. Kurland says the same reason long-term care facilities were vulnerable to COVID makes them vulnerable to breakthrough cases.
If you add up all the different factors like new strain coming along and being in an older age category, like in a nursing home, that puts you just at a bit higher risk. And then you're in a congregate setting. And those conditions are really ideal for the virus to spread if it can.
Dr. Kurland said a lot of people get confused about what 95% effectiveness means. He said the vaccine will protect you from being hospitalized or dying. It doesn't necessarily mean a vaccinated person won't test positive.
In this group of people that are really at the highest risk and who are going to end up in the hospital or die, they're protected from that outcome at about 95%.
And that's what happened at McKay's facility. All the vaccinated people, most of whom were in the high-risk group, had mild symptoms. The only 2 people who were hospitalized were not vaccinated.
Our non-vaccinated staff who are younger did experience a little more, have a little more symptomatic stuff. Both of our residents who were non-vaccinated, in fact, ended up being hospitalized.
McKay hopes this is the last outbreak he and his residents will have to deal with.
I thought back in January when I got my vaccine, I thought I was on the other side of this.
Again, the big takeaway here, if you test positive for COVID after you're fully vaccinated, you are significantly more protected from going to the hospital or dying. And that's exactly what happened at McKay's facility. The people who got COVID and were fully vaccinated had mild or no symptoms. McKay's clinic got their second outbreak under control back in early May, and no one died from COVID. Do you have a question for us about breakthrough cases or anything else? Just let us know using the hashtag HeyDan.
All right, Kristen, thank you. She said it. Send those questions our way. I'm going to read a few as we finish up the show right after this. Hey. Hi. Almost didn't see you there. Let's talk about some questions we got on Twitter and over email tonight. This one from Mike asking about Mike Neerman possibly getting his old job back through an appointment. If they send him back to Salem, Mike asked, can Salem send him home again? Not for the same thing. So he got expelled for the situation with opening the door to the protesters. They couldn't just turn around and expel him again for the exact same thing. It's kind of a double jeopardy situation. So if he gets put back in, he starts again from scratch. We got one from Maxine asking about the libraries and the reopening tomorrow. She wants to know, can you please look into why libraries in Multnomah County aren't reopening now that COVID restrictions are lifting? And there's a variety of reasons. Some will be reopening. In fact, some are open right now. There are about 5 that were open as cooling centers because of this terrible heat we've been dealing with. Others will be reopening with everything else. And some aren't going to be opening until July, maybe others until August. So the reason that's happening, there's a variety of reasons. One has to do with staffing. Another has to do with some renovations that they're doing. Others have some to do with some protocols. They're putting plexiglass in certain areas. So there's a variety of reasons, but yeah, they're going to be trickling open. And we'll keep an update. We'll see what we can do and let you know what's opening where. In the meantime, I'd like to know how you plan to enjoy life back to normal. Vaccinated people, tell me, you're about to enter a safe world that resembles one that we left a year and a half ago. Tell me what you plan to do. Give me some recommendations. I'd like to know. That's it. That's the story for tonight. We'll see you back here tomorrow.